Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, how's it going, man?
Chilling like Bob Dylan. What's up, Mr. Famous over here?
12K subscribers.
Hey,
What,
hey,
what?
that's two K more than you had the last time we I think when we set this up. So
Yeah, maybe like a month ago. Yeah.
that's great, man.
How are you doing? I mean, your stuff's blowing up. Do you try to set it up so that like during the summer you're doing your course and getting the fuck out of the heat, or what do you do during the summer?
It's just kind of been nature of the beast. Like
Yeah.
that's when the schedules were there. Yeah, it seems like I got like usually I go to China in the summer, and then
What
I got
what
Europe that's
cities you hit in
upcoming.
China?
I was in this last time I was in Shanghai and Shenzhen.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. I really want to go out there eventually. I
This
just to see the difference. I know it's just so culturally like such a shock, so different. Do they
it
like us?
is.
Do they like Americans? As long as you're
Oh yeah.
respectful. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, I've never had an issue there.
You
Like,
probably
it's not.
Dude, I just was thinking like you probably get such better students over there. I mean, I don't know, is that racist to say, but like, is there a difference as far as like the when you do the courses out there versus you do them here? I'm sure everyone's really into it here, but it's just they seem to be so into the education system out there. Like, in the gyms, like they have like classrooms in a lot of the gyms where they teach, educational stuff.
Mhm. Um, yeah, I mean, yes, in some respects. Um, they ask really good questions, and they're very into it, and they're appreciative of teaching in general. Um, Sometimes, from what I've seen, again, this is a harsh generalization, but um, thinking like they can follow formulas very well. But sometimes, well, what about when you see this? And that's tough. But I don't think that's native to
Yeah, I think it's
people
just
in China.
cultural,
Like we don't
right?
do that here. Well, it's just like it's like if you're learning to cook for the first time. You you follow a recipe. You're not going to be like
Yeah.
learning all of these things, from the get-go. Eventually, you might get to that point. And so, yeah, I think they're it's a gamut like anyone else. I mean, sometimes there's people who fall asleep in class there too. So.
I don't know if it's true, but I just get this sense that culturally there's like less individuality, like it's less of a prize thing like it is here, where it's like you have to be your own unique person and so like loud about it. Where I can see that maybe translate into over there being more about like getting the systems down instead of like just culturally not being the one to challenge the system or think outside the box as much necessarily. But
There's a few who do.
yeah,
Um, I mean, it's funny. Like I even in the U.S., I see it's much more regionally dependent. Like people, like I'll teach in the Midwest. Some places they don't ask hardly any questions.
yeah.
East
Wonder what
Coast
that
asks a
is.
lot of questions. West Coast, they'll challenge you more.
Yeah.
Like, and so it's very different here.
That's interesting. So for usually those of you who don't know, we're talking about Zach's Human Matrix course, which I've recommended quite a few people to go to. I'm going to try to check it out. I think you're coming to San Fran this year, right? Is that November?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll probably check it out when you come up here. So I really think that you're like a great way to like introduce people. I mean, if you even if you haven't been introduced, even if you're really knowledgeable about it, but I think that you're probably like one of the most adept at explaining the more of the complex concepts in a simple way. So I always recommend people check out your stuff. So thanks a lot for coming on. All my people are really familiar. I work with a lot of people who've worked with you in the past too. So a lot of cool stuff that I've seen you do. So thanks a lot. When I first had you on last year, I had been pretty maybe like 6 months or so into kind of the Hartman's model. I had been really, PRI heavy before for a few years, so a little bit different. So now I feel like we can even have a little better conversation. I also feel like people on my channel have kind of like educated themselves as well. A lot of people are following Bill's stuff and other people who are pushing his stuff out there. So I was thinking maybe first thing we could talk about just real basically before we get into some other things is just a tiny bit about the archetypes and the structures and kind of the role that it plays in how we start to kind of have conversations initially. So maybe you could just give us a very, very quick basic, because most of my people are pretty familiar with the basics of the narrow and wide ISAs, but maybe you can just delve into the concept real briefly with that.
Yeah, so you basically have two different body types on either extreme. And obviously there's a lot of people who, it's a continuum. But you have people, narrow would be those who are oriented more vertically. And so what I mean by that is usually their frames are either longer or smaller in terms of radius. And basically that changes the orientation of a lot of their tissues. If you imagine a rectangle and you were to draw a line from one corner to the other corner, that line would be closer to a vertical axis. Contrast that with someone who's a wide ISA. A wide ISA would be someone who's got a shorter and a wider, stockier frame. And so their radius in terms of the size of their body is a lot of times much larger, but they might be shorter. And so again, if we drew that same line from one corner to the other, that line would be more approaching the horizontal axis. And so for each of those individuals, they'll have an easier time moving closer to the subsequent axis because that's what the structural constraints allow for. So, if we looked at like golf for an example, because I think that's an easy one, generally narrower folks tend to have a much more vertical club head versus wide folks tend to have a much more horizontal club head. There's certain activities where you're moving along a vertical axis where if you look at the elite of the elite, a lot of them tend to be much more narrow versus, wide, so on and so forth. I think like an easy example of that is like a high jumper. High jumpers, you don't see any like bodybuilder size high jumpers who are Olympic caliber. On the flip side, look at any NFL lineman. They all have a certain build. You don't see a guy my size being an NFL lineman. So even if I go binge on food in Vegas, like I like to do sometimes. So yeah, I mean, and it's just basically what we're appreciating is that there are people who have different builds. They have different constraints based on those builds. And what we want to do with each of them is two things. We want to be able to maximize the amount of movement that's available within those constraints. So that way, loading of any kind, whether it's just dealing with gravity, lifting weights, performing sports, is as broadly distributed as possible so that way they can stay healthy. And then the other side of that would be to gain whatever fitness one needs to so they can do the things they want to do and ideally minimize wear and tear.
Yeah.
And knowing the constraints is part of that.
And I would say with at least the people that I deal with, bodybuilders, usually like fucked up bodybuilders, is they come narrow, wide, all shapes and sizes. They always kind of end up pretty A to P compressed, like a lot of times both of them, but they kind of get there differently, right? So maybe we can go through just a little bit of this sequence of like compensations that happen, kind of based off of your presentation type.
So there's a lot of steps into it. The general rule of thumb, there's a few things. And whether this is the step-by-step sequence, it likely all happens at once based on an individual structure, and then that increases over time. And a lot of these are very normal. In fact, I try to use adaptation versus compensation because I think there's a lot of negative connotations around
Yeah.
compensation. Like what are you compensating for? That's like, what are you adapting for? Ooh. So first assumption that we make is we're all asymmetrical. That's documented in the literature. It's based off of our organ attachment. There's a lot of forces that we have to deal with based on that asymmetrical organ attachment. And so to counteract some of the forces with that, the overwhelming tendency of individuals is to have more available or turn more into the right side of the body or turn the spine to the right. Now there's variance if you start looking like the lower part of the thorax on down and the higher part of the thoracic spine on up, but the majority is to the right, assuming your organs are in the right place. It's actually flipped if they're the other way, funny enough. And so the way that turn happens is different depending on your structure. So a narrow will have turn more along that vertical axis, and so the way they push forward is generally in the upper part of the pelvis on the left, whereas a wide, again, because they don't have access to that motion and they're operating more along the horizontal axis, they produce the same turn, but it's more closer to the horizontal axis. It's more on an oblique, and it usually happens through the lower pelvis. There's other areas up top, but like that's, I think, an easy starting point to think about it. And so the first step is that. Now, to counteract that, because otherwise you're just continuing to fall to the right, you then have to begin to start pushing the right side more forward because that allows you to put more force down into the ground. And so basically you got right turn, body shifts forward to put force downward. And then after that, the next step would be to push even further forward, which puts your weight more on the outsides of the body. And then you get front side musculature, among other things, counteracting that. That's where you get that flattening or AP compression effect, which basically limits the ability of the turn. It takes someone who might be more cylindrically shaped and it flattens them out. And if you think about it from a balance standpoint, that's super useful because you literally have a wider base of support. So you're not going to fall over. If I got big old muscles like Arnie in the back or you in the front, I probably don't want to fall. So it's useful in that sense. And it's probably a necessary adaptation to some extent to have a lot of muscle mass. And if we kind of go back to the original goal I talked about, produce as much fitness as possible while minimizing wear and tear, one piece, but also having enough motion so you can stay healthy. The further you go down that, the less motion you have. So then you got to ask, well, how much does one need to stay healthy, both in the short and long term? And so, the idea then would be to reverse engineer that if you feel it necessary to gain motion. So again, you can broaden your load distribution.
And so in general, if you're like the more narrow and you're working out, because it's a little different, right? Maybe you can talk on this for just a second, like, because I know I see it. I work with some strictly pain patients, but from like the PTs I network with, but most of my people that fly out to see me, they're like bodybuilders and a little different presentations, right? When you're having to produce force, maybe you can talk about like the differences between whether it's specific to a wide or narrow ISA and someone who is, compensating, just going or adapting, just going through life, versus someone who's adapting with the stresses of the gym and really trying to push some hard weight and got some big goals in the gym.
Yeah, so narrows generally, and again, there's always exceptions to the rule, but they're rely more on the elastic system. They're bouncy. Some of that has to
Absorbers is what
do.
I always thought of
Yeah.
before I ever knew Hartman's thing at all. I always thought of like there are people that are force producers and force absorbers. And after like, hearing his mom, like, oh, kind of, I can see where my brain was going with that.
Yeah, and I think that's a useful distinction. So narrows would be more on the absorption side, which is why you see them in a lot of bouncy sports, whether that's ballet, figure skating, um, sometimes top end speed, like think 400-meter runners, some 200, 100, it can be hit or miss because of the acceleration component. Um, and so, yeah, so they're going to rely a lot more on the stretch shortening cycle, momentum, things of that nature. Versus wide, they're more the producer side. They don't have as much access to that, but the way in terms of their limbs align, among other things, they're very good at putting force downward into the ground, and so that's why probably the elite of the elite bodybuilders, you probably tend to see more wides than you would narrows because bodybuilding doesn't rely as much on speed. Same thing with powerlifting. You could argue, it depends on weight class with Olympic lifting, but that's really the big difference between the two. And
Yeah.
so if I'm a narrow who is taking on something that requires a lot of force independent of speed or with minimal absorption, they may have to make adaptations to be able to do that. Some of those may not be favorable from a health standpoint. Now, does that mean that narrows should never bodybuild or powerlift or anything like that? No. But we just have to recognize that if that's your goal, there's going to be trade-offs that you might have to manage throughout that so you can stay healthy pursuing that.
So a couple things about the narrows because they seem to be the ones that I have fly out the most. They seem to be the more fucked up ones, which makes sense because I do think a lot of it is more subtle. Even if you're like a wider person, like you're not like the most connected, it's still easier to feel like if you're fucking up, if something's going really haywire versus if you're a really narrow. And sometimes it is, but a lot of times I see compressed narrows. This stuff is very subtle, and it's like it's harder to be aware of. And it's hard to see sometimes even with an outside eye unless you really know what you're looking at. So, and then I also think a lot of narrows maybe fall into like somewhat of a hypermobile kind of feeling or category where they're just so good at putting things on their axial skeleton. So when I have these people that and I do have a couple people with Ehlers Downers and stuff like that, but not even taking that into account, just the people that have trouble really producing force, like we're talking about maybe on the far end of the narrows. Is there anything that in particular that you do or that you like to do to get them better at? Because it's like what I notice is like I have people that have so much joint space available. I'm like, I don't have to do anything to utilize to get any more. I just need you to manage what we got. And so I'll do like, I tend to just do a ton of isometrics, especially if it's in like a narrow. I might put them in like a more of an IR bias isometric, for example. Do you like balloons with this population at all? Or what are some ways that you like to get them to better handle their capabilities and really actually produce force?
It's person dependent because obviously, like you have other adaptive layers that can sometimes push one person one way or the other. But I think for many of them, just because you have the capability or your structure is biased more towards this doesn't mean you're very good at it. And so for the majority of people, like a lot of the process, especially because eventually at a certain point we all become limited because time, gravity, all that. Um, I find myself spending a lot of time using isometrics, working on just absorption capabilities, whether that's deceleration training, things of that nature, and then teaching them to be able to produce speed from that position has been really useful. And then when it comes to lifts, it's just about working within ranges or positions that people are going to have an easier time accessing. And so the analogy that I always give people is like if someone could only raise their arms like to about shoulder height, would you do overhead pressing with them?
Right.
Well, and I think 199% of people would probably say, of course not. Right. So think about this. If you have someone who has a physical structure that limits their ability to deadlift or push their hips backwards without having to do some funky stuff, are you going to deadlift them? Well, maybe, but do you want that to be the A1 main, that you're doing the triples with? Maybe not. So maybe on that in that category, squat variations might be better for them. If I flipped it the other way with uh, wides, right? It's like if they have a structure that's not conducive to squatting in a vertical position, well, maybe I'm not going to choose a lot of heavy vertical activities as their main because you have to just ask yourself, well, what are the possible trade-offs for that? Am I okay with that? Because if you take this model out of things and you look at most EMG studies that compare squats to deadlifts, it's like when it gets heavy enough, kind of similar loading,
Yeah.
right? Um, now, then we can kind of talk about specific musculature, but that's probably more akin to bodybuilding. But it's really just about choosing positions that people can produce force or produce fitness while minimizing any trade-offs, and that's just working within constraints. That's why it's important to know what motions are available. That's why it's important to know what structure you have in front of you.
Yeah, I tend to almost do like a Joel Seaman approach with a lot of these people. A lot of times I'll have them stop at around 90-ish degrees, at least for a while, because a lot of times as they, like say it's just a chest press, as soon as they go back, it's like not on tissues. Now I just see like axial skeleton moving. So just holding that for a couple breaths is pretty good. And just curious, while we're on the topic of like kind of hypermobile people, I do have a couple clients, and I've seen some people kind of question how to deal with like Ehlers-Danlos and stuff like that. And I think the ECM provides a pretty good like lens to look at that through. Is that how you would like take care of somebody if they came to you with super hypermobility? You want them to like manage internal pressure and be able to create like expansion where needed, have integrity in your stack and stuff like that? Or how would you approach somebody like that? Because a lot of times I see people almost go the opposite and go through like extreme extension and things like that because that's what makes them stable in their mind.
Yeah. Um, one thing I want to say is if you got someone who's quote unquote hypermobile, that doesn't mean that they have segmental or relative motion at all the
Yeah.
joints.
Well, it's usually
It's
just
just,
hypermobile, a couple segments, right? Like a few things.
yeah. So the process is still the same. It's like you have to gain as much motion as you need, relative motion, right? Making sure I can individualize the joint mechanics so that way they stay healthy, right? Because again, it's like if I have a broad load, it's less likely for me to have localized things that can lead to nociception, which potentially causes pain, right? But a lot of people with Ehlers-Danlos have a lot of pain. So it's like, well, what's going on there? Well, it's the load is happening through one segment, and it's just a lot of motions happening there. So you still go through that process. Um, but like those are the people who need to learn how to produce force really fast because a lot of times with the connective tissues being so elongated, for lack of a better term, or hypermobile, um, they can't create the quick contractions needed that you would see in high speed activities. And so uh, I like a lot of decelerative training for them because you have to learn how to stop quick. And so that's a useful skill.
Are you just
Um,
running or using a sled or are you using like weights when you
Let go of a weight and
yeah,
catch.
yeah, yeah.
Fake throws. Um, Run, stop. Like, can you put the emergency brake on? I like tempo work a lot and not locking out. So think like, a lot of your oxidative lifts. Like if these people can work stuff and not lock out, they will get cooked. If I had, if everyone had access to a Voltra, I would do so much of the eccentric overload because that's another thing. It's like that thing just slows you down so much. Not a sponsor, but they should be, dang it. Um, That thing it forces you to slow down, and there's probably some good stimuli when you do the eccentric overload like that thing allows for. Those are some of the big BFR. I think that's also underrated because it's just like, well, if I got someone who can't produce maybe a lot of force and they can't produce it fast, what are all the strategies I can use to do that? Everything I said. And so I think in that sense, that's useful for them.
So would you recommend like avoiding like excessive compression, like really big extension, like potentially vagus nerve stuff? I know a lot of times that's going to irritate them.
Mm. Well, it depends on what you mean. So a lot of times these folks have significant sternal depression. And so sometimes driving extension
Yeah, for
to
that way.
reduce rectus abdominis can be super useful. So it's just context dependent. And again, what type of adaptation am I trying to drive? I don't really think like there's many bad choices. There's bad timing or using the wrong tool for the job. What adaptation do they need? It's like not everyone who's got Ehlers-Danlos is going to have the same end goal of what they want. Like some might want to do flexibility sports and not be painful. Others might want to do something that's force production. Others might want to, I don't know, play with their kids and not have problems. And the tools that you need to attain each of those goals is person dependent.
Yeah. And yeah, that can be so frustrating. Like as you like that, because you can do such cool stuff, you feel like, and you're it's like, oh, I gotta utilize this range that I've got. You're like, no, you need to like close that down and don't use your superpower because it's fucking you up. Because it really, I mean, like I said, it is a superpower to be able to do some of this stuff. That's where you see the most elite people. They're on these extreme ends of the spectrum. But yeah, it can be pretty frustrating for a lot of my people. I was curious about like let's say that you have somebody who's just ADP compressed. They're just walking around pretty much missing all their measurements, and maybe they've got like some compensatory ER if they're like a really narrow or something like that, and they're in their shoulders or potentially like, but they're ADP compressed. They really shouldn't have any space. What's like just some good bang for your buck, like one or two good warm ups you would recommend? Like typically like sideline for the wider guys tends to be the go-tos. Is that where you would go?
I mean, if you got someone who's limited in all directions, sidelining is good for most people.
Yeah. Do you like to
Um,
do any any like pressure on the hip or you do like a block? You do it all? Anything in particular that you're a
yeah,
fan of?
I'll do yoga blocks, like one along the rib cage, one along the pelvis. I'll do a sandbag on top.
Now, would you do
Uh,
that on the side that's just got more compression, or are you trying to do it on the side that's like more turned, or you just do it on either side?
well, in theory, if I'm AP compressed, I would be limited on both sides,
Yeah.
and so if one side looks normal, well, then what's likely happened is because of the increased muscle activity on one side, it's creating what looks like a turn the other way, and that's what's giving you the motion. So generally, I would do it on both.
Yeah.
For a majority of people, again, because of some of the asymmetrical bias of the internal organs, it might be easier to do it on the right side, but that's not a hard and fast rule, I don't think. Um, and so, like, I think that's good. I think very moving very slowly, and whether you do some sort of rolls is good, or even just like
Like a lazy
swingy
roll
sort
kind
of
of thing, or what do you mean when you say
lazy
roll?
roll, or I like there's one I call wave roll where you're thinking about moving one piece at a time. Think like segmental rolling, but
Yeah.
starting on your side. I think that's really good. And then like, can you move really flowy in standing? Like there's a move that I like that my buddy Joe Cisnelli showed me called German arm swings, where it's like the analogy he gave, and it's funny because I can see the visual. Remember in you saw Ice Ventura, right?
Oh yeah, it's been a minute, but yeah.
Remember when he got stuck with the darts that were going to knock him out, and he did the turn in the jungle, and his arms went
Yeah.
swinging? So like that, like can you move your body without producing a lot of tension? That's super useful. I also have been like lately doing a lot more really long, slow, drawn out inhales. Like
Yeah.
just thinking about filling as much as possible without forcing. Like the analogy I give is like imagine you're inflating a basketball slowly. Like basketballs fully inflated have a lot of bounce. So we kind of want something like that.
And you're still doing the mouth exhales without?
Yeah, it's very soft. But I mean, lately, and I have to give credit to both of my coaches, Trevor and Sebastian, who work with me. Like we've done some different things with the way we approached the breath that have worked really well. So like for some of those really stiff people, doing like breaking up the inhale. So like breathe in a little bit, hold,
Oh,
and then
okay.
breathe in more, more and then breathe in more, especially if someone's got a lot of muscle
Yeah.
activity on the top or they have more of that sternal depression. Like that slow inflation seems to work really well.
Yeah.
But if I have someone who is significantly arched, it may not. And so, but then I think just like kind of the long, slow inflation. And I've noticed emphasizing that with a lot more people seems to help. And you had mentioned pressurization. Like one of the keys to pressurization is proper inflation. And so if I can teach someone to be able to inflate in all directions as opposed to just down and forward, I've seen a lot of cool things just from lifting standpoint, not just being more comfortable, but better force production.
Something I wanted to ask too, real quick, while we're going over the ISAs and stuff, was we talked about getting out of the right side, essentially some like late ER stuff typically. Is that typically going to be more of a focus with the narrows, just because they're so buried into that side compared to the wides?
Well, again, both turn right. It's just a matter of how they create the turn.
Because what I tell
Um,
me if this is just what I've seen or if this is what like tends to happen. Because I mean I just go off what I see when people come out here. So I see like the turn with the wides for sure, but a lot of times I see them just start to like even answer tilt and like dump forward a little bit more. And I have some narrows that are pretty dump forward too, so it's not universal, but in general I have them a little bit. I would say just from what I'm seeing, maybe slightly less turn, still turn, but more like anterly and then pushed a little bit, whereas the narrow is a little bit more flat. Some pretty pushed under sometimes, but pretty aggressive turned. Is that a fair statement to say with the
um,
workout population?
yeah, well, you got to look at where they're starting from. So a narrow is going to start in a more ER representation or position, which would be more shifted backward, more counter-nutated through the sacrum. And so they kind of go forward and down and then forward and out. Whereas a wide, they don't start in that way back position. They start with the sacrum more nutated. And so kind of the next phase would be go more forward and down and then go forward with the outside
Yeah,
sort of thing. So that would be like high arches sort of thing.
yeah.
And so, I've seen both. I think that the difference in the way the turns manifest is a lot of times from what I've seen with wides is you generally see more of like a right side bend, right shoulder lower, so on and so forth. And because of where space is created when I create that turn, they might not look as turned to the right, but it's almost kind of like the pelvis is kind of going this way.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Because their weight almost goes back to the right heel
Yeah. Yeah.
versus with a narrow, and again because the top of the pelvis is pushing forward, that puts more of the weight towards the front of the foot on the left. It has to do with where the guts go, but um, that's going to probably make them look a little bit more turned left. They're both still turns. It's just how do they get there?
And I would think too, I mean, just like doing bilateral moves and just exercising in general, like the wides will be a little less likely to turn into certain moves than the narrows would be under load, just based off of structure, right?
It's probably the way that they would turn is different.
Yeah.
Again, wides rotate. It's just they do so closer to that horizontal axis, and so it's kind of more like tipping,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly. So yeah.
So it's less of a dramatic vertical turn that you would see. It's still a turn, it's just not as much. And so
So
you still have some, but you might see. So like I see this all the time. I don't know if I'd be curious if you see this, but like if a wide's doing a loaded squat, it's often that I see the right, like from the back, I see the right hip higher than the
oh
left.
yeah, yeah. And a lot of times I'll see them, like you said, the wider actually move their right foot in front of the left because they are turned back so far. And I've had them in their brain think that they're forward on the right because of that, because their foot wants to go there. I'm like, no, that's your body trying to get somewhat straight.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
so both presentations definitely need to like try to get out of the right side with some late ER strategies. Um, like, what are some of your favorite strategies for that, as far as maybe like one positional drill and then maybe like an actual like exercise that you like to get out of that side?
Well, the way you'd want to create the turn is different on each because of where space is created. And so like for narrows, um, when they create that right turn, the right leg is in more ER. And so you actually want to drive IR from that side to be able to turn to the other. There's a lot of moves you could use. One, my buddy Mark showed me this one. Marin, he's good. He's actually working on me. But the three-quarter side lying has been very good for that. Where basically the right leg is down, you open up the hip and you push that way. Like that's been super useful. Um, I've actually progressed that with some people to like doing basically that position, but on a squat with a foam roller. That's worked really well. So the foam roller be on the wall. It's almost like it looks like a sumo squat in a way, but it's just the way the setup is different. It works pretty good. Um, for wides, it's a little different because for them, you kind of want to, because more of their weight's going to be on the right heel, you want to use that to push you back into the left side. And again, that has to do with the way the sacral position changes on the turn.
But
And
that's
so,
so I think that's what I was thinking of, like why I thought that the rights were more like the narrows were more in the right side. It's just the propulsion strategy is a lot different. So
yeah,
that's kind of
yeah.
what I was thinking. So you're talking about like a goblet kicking back into your left side, like a stagger stance or something like that, left foot
You
elevator.
could do that. So with a wide, like so, then maybe you're doing like lying on your left side, pushing the right foot into the wall with the right foot being a little bit ahead to get you to load back on the left.
Yeah.
And then like a something like a back stagger squat or back stagger RDL, like where the
Like a
left foot's
cantilene.
back and you're pushing that way. Yeah.
Okay.
Chops work really well too. I've been finding those pretty useful. There's a lot of ways. But it's like the thing I would say with the majority of people is like all of this presupposes really three things: that you can keep a very good head position throughout, meaning you're able to look out in front of you, you're not looking down, you're not looking up, because that helps keep the airway open. You're able to get whatever ground contacts you need, whether that's through the feet, so you can create pressurization through the feet, and then you can get the breath. Like, can you inflate without using a lot of superficial musculature, and can you exhale enough that it changes the lower rib cage position so you can create a backwards weight shift? You know,
Thanks. Do you like the fencer squat? Is that something you use?
I played with it for a lot.
You don't use it
It's
anymore?
it's like it from a technique standpoint, it's challenging, and
Yeah.
it could be that I'm terrible at coaching it, which I'll always default to that. Which, if I am, then I need to find a way to make it easier, so that way I can find a better way to get results. I actually that foam roller squat I was telling you
Yeah.
about, where you're on the diagonal, it seems you get similar things with um, the added constraint makes it a little
It's
easier.
easier. Is that called something? Can they search that on your YouTube or something? What's it
I
called?
just filmed it, so I'll,
Okay.
I'll send you a link to it.
It'll be on your IG soon.
Maybe, yeah,
Okay,
I don't
cool.
know.
Cool,
Stay
cool.
tuned. Or as they
Yeah.
say in China, Jing Qing Qi Dai.
Nice. Yeah. So the fencer, that would be something you would try to do with more of a narrow, if that was something you were going to do then. Kind of go
Typically.
for, yeah.
Yeah, because it's literally the same foot stance. I anchor the right and I'm pushing off of that to load into the left.
I've been playing with that. Sean Astorga, who loves your stuff.
Yeah, yeah, he's great.
He's real
Very
big on
smart.
that. He kind of helped me with that a lot. So I think it's definitely a good tool. But you're right, it is so it is so minor and tricky. And like I usually have someone do a lazy roll first before going in there, just to somewhat connect a little bit. But I'm curious to see yours. I think some added constraints can make it even better. So just change the subject. Something I was curious about because it's big in like the fitness world, and I know it's got to be there in the PT world a little bit, but I think it's a little different because in the PT world you have a little more proof is in the pudding type of thing. But do you get like pushback from people that are like evidence based and like science based, saying there's not like enough research and things like that for you to be like thinking that these are like this kind of stuff is making actual changes, or you don't get that much pushback at this point if things kind of evolved?
I don't really check my comments, so if I do, I don't see them.
Is that like, do people think that way
So,
at all? Are you aware? Is there like still the traditional style
oh,
where,
I'm sure.
yeah,
I mean, I see things on other pages, so it's like, yeah, I know that that's out there, but it's like, is having a conversation with them gonna afford me better outcomes with my patients and clients and the people who I work with?
do you ever have them
Probably
reach
not.
out to you and like that maybe they're not seeing results or they just come to your course? They're,
I've had some who have come to my course, or maybe they practice a certain way and they see this, and yeah, I mean, Cam, I'll say this story because he always brings this up almost every time he sees me. But Cameron Pulse is a friend of mine. He's a great PT out in Maine. Um, he was very much like orthopedic residency, FAA. I don't know if he was a fellow. Um, and he came to my course, and I know, like, I don't even remember this, but he'll always say this. He's like, I remember you tested a measure. I mean, it was like horizontal abduction, and I get like 25 degrees, and it wasn't like a change with an exercise, and it wasn't that the change is what like wowed him. It was my reaction to that, and what I said was like. okay, I mean, this was an okay change. It was kind of like, and he's like, I worked so
I'd kill
hard
for
to
that.
get like a fraction of that. Yeah. And so I think like that, was kind of a moment for him. And now he's an absolute whiz. Because he's spent, all the time and energy to be able to get good at this. And so like, I am only going to spend time on things that are going to help me get better outcomes. If someone of that crowd would come to me with the hope saying I have a better way that would get better outcomes, and they can show me that that would do that, I would be all ears. But like I'm not. Otherwise, I don't care. Like I don't care to debate. Like that's why I don't care to debate. Like why don't we have a conversation? Let's just both get better from it. A debate implies that person A has this position, person B has this position, and there's not going to be any middle ground conversation. And so I would just rather not spend my time with that. Like I'm getting old. I'm getting too old to fight on the internet, man.
Yeah, I feel that. Like what makes up your class mostly? Is it a little bit of everybody? You got PTs, trainers? Do you have just some meatheads in there that just want to like learn shit? Like what's the class usually
Yeah.
made out of? A little bit of everything?
It's yeah. It's funny. Like I'll have some classes that are all coaches. I'll have some that are all PTs. I had one that was a significant amount of chiros,
Yeah.
LMT. I've had fitness enthusiasts, people who aren't in the field, like come and say they got it. So, and I think like in the beginning of the seminar, I try to tell people, look, wherever you're at with this sort of thing, this is like what you should focus on this course. Because with any 2-day seminar, it's impossible to retain everything.
Yeah.
Like the only one who does is me, and that's because I teach it. And like that's the highest form of learning, which is why at the very end, I make everyone teach.
Have you made any like significant changes to your course? Like anything that you've really changed your views on as far as concepts or putting things into practice at all?
Yeah, I make decent tweaks most every time. I'd say recently the way I'm coaching the steps of the stack is a bit different. Some of the
Yeah.
stuff I'm talking with you breathing wise that's in there. There's some different testing that I'm looking at, just to make it easier. Like like there's a test. I still do this test in person, but I'm like, what are the big things that influence my decision making? And it's like, well, this one eventually is, but not quite. And so I have new testing, and the exercises change a lot because, again, like there's exercises I taught a year ago that I'm like, man, that's way too complicated. Can I find a way to make it simpler? Or it's like, this one was good, but this one's better. And so that's always being updated. So I try to make adjustments that coincide with what myself and the colleagues who work with me are getting the best results with. So, while I do a lot of the designing and building of things, like it's not just me. Like I wouldn't, again, I keep gassing up Sebastian and Trevor. Like I wouldn't be who I am if it weren't for those guys because they do some cool stuff with the people who they work with, and that helps inform my practice. And then it's about me to say like, well, here's what you can do. So instead, you're not learning from one, you're learning from three. It's just I'm the face, and I got better jokes than both of them.
That's something I always tell people who are like online or like in-person training. I try to tell them like how much value there is to having your guinea pigs for you that you can actually like try things out on. If you have like a steady group of clients that you can test things out and like hone your skills and ability to teach it, that's awesome. Like because I've got that my group that just is there forever. Then I've got the PT referrals where you go to your little more tried and true, your bread and butter kind of stuff, but stuff will move into there from my crew. And I don't know why, but it's like, yeah, I don't know why we get attached to like our testing. I don't like changing my testing I have, but for whatever reason, like there's this comfort in going through your routine of this is my sequence that I go through. So I've kind of introduced quite a few people to this kind of stuff. And I think there's some common mistakes people make when they first get into this. Are there any that you can think of off the top of your head when people first start getting into like ECM model and they're trying to like fix their issues or do certain things, something that you see as a common thread?
They don't spend nearly enough time mastering the basics and making sure they hit. I mean, it's like I talked about several. I would say it more advanced activities, but that's why I come back to it. It presupposes that you can get these three things. And so, like, if you can get the head position, your ability to contact whatever's outside of you, which is ground contact, and nail a good breath, like that gets you pretty far. And those three things are things you can apply with every single movement there is. Like, those three things are just as important on a 1RM back squat. And guess what? they're super important when you're cutting in the middle of some sort of game that you're playing. You know, if you're looking down playing, I don't know, whatever sport, you lost. Sorry. If you can't load into the ground effectively and push out, like you're gonna have a tough time. So I think more people should spend a lot more time on that, and not even just those basics, but like all of the basics, like sleep, food, things of that nature. If there's one thing that I emphasize a lot with the people who I work with is like make sure you get those because I work with a lot of people who I see some weird stuff,
Yeah, I bet
you know,
you
where I
probably
gotta,
you're like
yeah,
the
or
last
it's like,
one after a long list of people that come to you.
yeah, that's why I'm bald, man. But no, they're all wonderful. But it's like the measures. What I try to do is like, are you nailing everything conservative that you possibly can? And if you can't, then I can probably point you in some directions.
Yeah, that's very
So
true. I just experienced that like last week. I have a guy who I work with, and he tweaked himself in the gym, just overdoing range of motion. I'm trying to have him not do, and shoulder was fucked up. We were doing a bunch of stuff like specifically kind of, and then I just was like, let's just bring everything back. Like you've been doing all this, like let's just go to the basic three that we've done, and just bring your system back. And then like, oh, like now it's better. I'm like, okay, we could have done that 2 weeks ago. Sorry, could have just
yeah, yeah.
reset. And I was wondering, are there any technique things that you see wrong that people do when they first get into this? Because the most common thing that I see, and it makes sense for as bodybuilders, is just too much concentric muscle activity when they're trying to do this shit, right? That's got to be pretty common, at least with bodybuilders. Like just everything's tense, you can see like the neck going and stuff like that.
Yeah, you can't force these positions. Um, the concept I tell people is like it's not an on-off switch; it's more of a volume knob. And so a lot of times, again, built within the cueing that I use, it's like you need to be 3 out of 10 with your pressure, 4 out of 10. And if you got someone who's a 10 out of 10, which is that, it's like they need to learn 0 out of 10, so that way they have the contrast. That's definitely a big one. Forcing positions like trying to force the foot flat, which then they end up tipping the foot, significantly tucking the hips, things of that nature. But a lot of times those, again, if you spend time really maximizing the big three, right? Head position, ground contact, breath. A lot of times those issues that you would normally see aren't there unless you've picked a move that's too advanced for someone.
Do you recommend different types of breaths off of different like archetypes? I know sometimes people maybe benefit from different types of exhales potentially.
Yeah, inhale wise, like if someone's kind of more the sternal depressed type, I do um, shorter inhale, so inhale, pause, inhale, pause, inhale, pause. Um, if you're not that and you can get good expansion, then it's like fill as much as you can without forcing.
And
And it
then
shouldn't
same
feel like a
exhales.
stretch. Exhales, it usually depends on the archetype. Narrows, it's more soft, like,
Yeah,
well, for both, it could be soft.
yeah.
Um, Wide's a little bit more like pursed lipped. But again, both are slow, controlled, not forceful, if the goal is to gain motion. Um,
And is that because of the like compensatory exhalation of the kind of compressed narrow, like being already down a little bit more? They don't want to like force that down as much, so their exhales a little softer.
that's a part of it. So if you look at, part of this is just getting into physics, but if you look at
I love the physics.
the shape of the radius, like a shape of a tube, the smaller the tube, the higher the pressure. Smaller radius that is, the larger that is, the lower the pressure. And so we kind of want to flip flop that. So an easy example of this would be your blood vessels. Let's say you are super stressed or you're doing physical exercise. Your blood pressure increases, and the reason why is because the blood vessels constrict. So you could look at that as like a narrow, right? A narrow is built like a constricted blood vessel. And so you want to do things that are lower pressure. Well, how would I do that? The opposite. If I go with a big open mouth, it's a bigger radius, I have made the pressure going in and out lower, which is good because then that gives them the motions that their structure has a harder time accessing, specifically in the lower rib cage.
Yeah.
Um, Flip flop all that with a wide. So now if I got a big radius, let's say that was my blood vessel, well, that's going to be lower pressure, right? That's what happens when your blood pressure drops. Your blood vessels dilate, they get bigger. So then that would be the wide. Wide, generally larger radius, alterations in tube dimensions. That's going to make the pressure lower. And so if I want to make the pressure higher, make the radius of your mouth smaller. So that's how you can get a little bit more pressure. Um, Now, neither of those strategies work great if you got the person who's extremely stiff and they're tense. You got the 10 out of 10 everything. For them, usually it might be quiet nasal while they're doing some low tension activities. Or if I'm coaching one of the other two inhales I talked about, I might just say, look, just let the air fall out.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to, it's like I want to get the ribs to move, the lower ribs to move, but those individuals generally move everything to bring it down. And
Yeah,
if
exactly.
the
You see the
sternum
pooch.
comes down too far, then you can't fill up the chest, and then you can't create the pressurization capabilities you want.
Something that I talk a lot about is just how like a lot of the fitness industry is just so hyper focused on like the dead guy anatomy stuff, which is a big role in the weight room. It's stuff that we need to take into account. But I see some of these just crazy like claims and things and form where they really like have taken away like shape and pressure management, and that's not something that's even on their mind. And for some movements, especially like joints that are like away from, the ribs and your pelvis, is not that big of a deal. But maybe can you go over any instances where you would think that potentially like dead guy anatomy could be limiting if you don't have at least the basic foundation of some of the expansion compression stuff as far as what you're doing in the gym?
Well, I think some of that's useful because fiber direction you would affect your line of pull, and I mean, really to some extent, we were kind of talking about that with. It's just now we're looking at physical structure, right? And it also presupposes that the fiber orientation is going to be the same for everyone. Well, your fiber orientations of certain tissues are not going to be the same as mine. We have different things that it attaches to from a shape. Um, I think one thing that I've been thinking about a lot with this is it's harder to take into account pressure changes within the ventral cavity when you look at point A to point B on a given tissue. When I change that and the shape of my body is affected, that might change the line of pull. Like if you just look at it from like a origin insertion model, well, I'm tugging on one end to the other, but it's like if you take a big breath of air in, that changes all of the fibers between those 2 points. And so it's in that sense maybe could lead some people astray. Um, but and I think another thing too might be I think it falls much more short too under high speed
As
because then
far
you
as
got to look more at connective tissue and what that's doing instead of that. Like a lot of the talk that I see online is more muscle based.
yeah.
Um, but you don't see those same conversations being had as much when we throw speed in the equation, aside from like Newton's laws and stuff like that, which are useful. But no, I mean I think the most important thing is with whatever model you use, it just gets you consistent goals of what you're trying to achieve while minimizing trade-offs or having trade-offs that you're comfortable with. And so, if you can get it with looking at dead guy anatomy and you get it consistently and you think that that is the best way and there's no other alternative, then fine.
Yeah, I think a lot of people they use that model and they're intuitive to like feel what's going on and it can really like work really well. I mean, that's kind of how I did things. I knew you were supposed to have a stack and I like to feel my muscles. So I was like, okay, I'll use a range of motion and lift in a way where I really connect to that. So I didn't have any framework for other stuff. There were a few things that I kind of fucked up maybe I wouldn't have now, like if I would have understood like, like certain things with like squat patterns maybe as far as from the ECM perspective. But I think mainly what I see is when people start to sacrifice shape and lose potentially tension just to hit what they think is some range of motion that's going to get them the best result. That usually tends to be what I see. Is that something you would agree with?
I think so. Yeah. Like, yeah, it's like one thing would be I'm trying to think of like a good example of this. It's like forcing an anterior tilt to try to get the hamstrings loaded significantly in an RDL. Um, well, it's like it might influence tension capabilities proximally, but then it also limits your ability to push your body in a more horizontal position. So then it's like, well, are you really getting all the load through the hamstrings that you possibly can? Because you're only looking at them moving in one direction when it's like, I've been on a few cadavers in my day, and guess what? Those are not vertical muscles. They all have a rotational or helical orientation about them. And so I think you have to be able to respect that when it comes to exercise selection.
Yeah, what I was going to say earlier when you were talking about the breaths, is I get tons of questions about necks. I don't put out a ton of info about neck just because, like most of the time, right? If you do fix the other stuff, 90+% of the time, the neck will kind of fix itself. And a lot of times, if it doesn't, sometimes it's jaw stuff. Sometimes it's weird stuff. But I was wondering, is there any like tips you can give for people that are dealing with like minor neck stuff, besides just get better dorsal rostral expansion, get better rib control, and everything?
That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, like you said, if you should try to push as much of that as humanly possible, and that'll get you to go really far. On top of that, I also think learning to differentiate moving your thorax from your neck is really useful.
How
Um,
would you do that? Just like the arm bars and stuff, or
so that's one way. That's a low intensity way. High intensity way would be medicine balls throw variations where I'm looking straight ahead, but I'm turning my body one way or the other, which you can do that through a lot of stuff. You can do that with fake
chops?
throws. You can do that with just like,
Yeah.
Tai Chi arms. Like I think that's got a lot of utility. Um, once you have that in place though, and you've, like I said, emphasized all the ribcage stuff that you had mentioned, then for me, like the next best thing is to make sure all the sensory systems are in a good spot because that has a big influence on neck.
Like eyes
Not
and
not
stuff
just not
too.
just jaw. Yeah, but like there's tons of visual things that can influence neck
Yeah.
tension, tongue, malfunction. I've taken myofunctional therapy courses and utilized those types of exercises within my treatment, and I've seen some amazing stuff happen with neck on that. Same thing with like auditory system. Um, I've seen some cool things with like doing various things to the cranium and getting those tissues to move better, not like in the woo-woo cranial sacral way, but
Yeah.
just restoring some of the bounce.
Yeah.
Um, like that has a fair amount of utility.
You do much
So
manual stuff, like suboccipital stuff? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Or even just, I took this course recently, Crafta. It's like what I tell people is it is sort of like craniosacral, but way more evidence based and a lot more, like the guy who owns it, Henry von Peekarts. He's like an unbelievable researcher in the cranial field.
How
And
do you spell it again? Sorry.
oh, that's gonna be tough. VON. I think it's
Oh, you said
the
Sacra, the course?
oh Crafta,
Crafta.
Crafta.
Okay, Crafta. Cool.
Yeah, it's very good. But they teach a lot of different mobs to the cranial bones. And again, it's not like you're moving fluid. It's like the cranial bones should have a little bit of bounce to them. And it's more about restoring that. And, maybe I'm, faking myself out, but it's like there's times you can tell like this area doesn't move that well.
Yeah,
Now,
you got
I don't know
distracted.
why that is. And it's like maybe I can get it to have a little bit more rebound effect, and that can have some favorable things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the next stuff. All people ask me that a lot. I'm just like like sometimes just being more aware and doing more stuff makes it worse. So like I would just chill and do the breathing stuff and then like
Yeah.
look at some interdisciplinary stuff if you have to. Are you currently training any bodybuilders? Are you working with any like high level competitors? I know you were last time I talked to you pretty recently. I know you had the physique girl and just curious if you can anything.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think right now in my roster.
I mean, you should have a bunch
Uh,
in Vegas. You got the whole crew out there.
well, yeah, actually, funny. I wanted to ask you this. Are you friends with Sergio?
Yeah, Serge is my boy. I was trying to set y'all up. Yeah.
Well, so I just moved locations. I'm
Are
working
you
out of the American Barbell
okay, cool. Yeah, yeah.
showroom, and he's one of the athletes. And I was looking at your podcast, John, and I'm like, oh, you know
Yeah,
each other.
I'll link y'all up. Yeah, because I try to go out there every 2 months or so. I haven't been out there in a while, but yeah, he's getting
Yeah,
ready for a show about 8 weeks. So yeah,
yeah.
I watch
Well, I
his
see him. I see
videos.
him on and off.
Yeah, yeah, watch his movement. You'll be able to see what he needs. But yeah, I'll try to link y'all up because it'd be really good if he could work with somebody at least a little bit, as
Yeah,
getting ready for a show. He's made some good progress, and he's some of these bodybuilders like not all of them, but some of them are like so coachable. He's like an athlete, like where they can be
Oh yeah,
super coachable.
all of the bodybuilders I've worked with, because I was just thinking, I don't think I have anyone right now. I have more athletes, I'd say, at this juncture, or just speed up movement pros.
Yeah.
Uh, they've all been super coachable. Well, it's like one advantage that bodybuilders have over many others is like the mind muscle connection, and so
Yeah.
super good at feeling things,
Just
which
the
is
smallest space available and he can utilize it, where someone else might need a little bit more. Yeah.
yeah, like that. And it's like the two people who can feel things really well is bodybuilders and golfers.
Golfers, huh?
They're so
Yeah.
finicky when it comes to like swing and stuff like that. And that's the one sport where I say a lot of this stuff I've seen transfer the fastest.
Yeah.
Like I'll work with a golfer and we'll do a few things to the feet, and it's like, okay, now see if you can implement that in the swing, and it's just like boom, and then it goes far.
Yeah, I always hear like I was great that first nine, and then it went back a little bit, but it's like first
Yeah,
nine was so good.
yeah,
Um, when you're training athletes, this is kind of an interesting topic that some people always. I feel like people change their view, but when you're training athletes or you have an athlete training, are you trying to promote like them maintaining relative motion during their workouts, or are you not thinking about it, let them orient as much as possible, or do you kind of just let them do that during their sport and you try to, like I said, give them more options when you're working together or having them working in the gym, unless they're like really focused on just like a strength period or something like that, of course.
yeah. Um, it's a lot of it. Bruce Exner said this once, and I think it really stuck with me. Is like your job with athletes is to give them contrast, especially in season. And so,
Yeah, I like that.
if they're playing sport, whatever, you want to try to do everything you can. That's not that. And so, a lot of it is a lot of the same things we even talked about with hypermobile people. So it's like, well, what's most sport? Um, Lots of high force, high bounce activities, moving fast, etc. So what isn't that? Maybe some slow speed stuff. Uh, Emphasizing the decelerative component, I think, is super useful. Gaining as much relative motion as you can, and then just being able to maintain that shape under load. So that's what a lot of my programming looks like. I mean, obviously it's person dependent, but it comes back to what is the rate limiting step for them hitting whatever their goal is in the sport, and just doing things to exploit that. And I mean, even if we're talking about something that's more pure strength focused, yeah, there's going to be some orientation. But I'm still coaching eyes, ground contact, breath, teaching them to pressurize as well as they could. It's just you don't want to tip that to the point where now it becomes counterproductive. We're losing enough motion to where now that's putting load in areas we don't want it.
Yeah. I feel like that's changed a little bit over recent years. Like I feel like there used to be a time where people almost felt like they were like gonna like make their athlete not explosive anymore or something if they train that way. I'm like they're athletes, man. We're not that
Yeah,
good.
it's like if you could, it wouldn't be at that level.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like they're like especially at the highest level, um, they're wired different. I'll have a personal story on this. So one of the guys who I worked with in Memphis, he lives in Vegas, and this is when I worked at Elevate Sports Performance Healthcare. They're great. They're in Vegas. But he came into the gym and we were playing spike ball, and he's like, "Oh, what's this? Never played it before." And he just watched him play a little bit, and he went in there, and then like he was killing like bouncing off the wall and hitting it, and it's just like never played but did that. They're wired different, and
Yeah.
so
What was the sport you said?
basketball. He's an NBA
Oh,
guy.
you played basketball. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's probably like, oh, this is similar. This is perfect. Just right.
Yeah. So, but I have seen that like examples of that countless times with people at a high level of anything. And so I think, yeah, one, I think a lot of people who were afraid of that hadn't worked with that many high level athletes. Because it's like I've ruined, a whole lot of NBA careers when I was there.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's just like you hope that whatever you can do supports them to their goals, and at the very least, try to do everything you can to keep them healthy as long as possible. Um, and could there theoretically be things that are going to make them worse? Maybe if you do so much that you offset the amount of the sport that they're doing, but you're not going to be able to do that just based on time constraints.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what my thoughts. Um, something that I've talked about a little bit, but I know you've talked about, and I'm sure you can explain a little bit better, is like a lot of times when I'm trying to like explain why it's important to be aware of certain things is the pain, like it's easy to get the pain point across, right? You can't progress if you're in pain, like no one wants to fucking hurt. But I try to like, get across how some of this stuff can really impact your aesthetics. And I think like the belly pooch is like a real common thing that a lot of people have. I've got clients, who are like little girls who are 110 pounds. If they are in a certain position, they're like, what the fuck's happening? Like, why do I look like this? Can you explain a little bit about that presentation and potential ways we could like address it, maybe?
Yeah. So um, it's funny because you talking about that reminds me there was this YouTube video of this guy. I don't remember what it was, but he was on his quest to get his body fat really low, so he would get rid of that lower abdominal pooch. And like he was at 10 or even a little bit below that, and he was trying to get even lower, and it just wouldn't budge. And I just looked at him like, I don't think body fat was the rate limiting step. Like, because what happens is when you have a significant amount of tissue or tension up high, it creates a squeezing force in the upper part of the body, and that pushes things downward. And so what happens is you
I'm sorry.
literally
I'm
have
sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you. When you say up high, do you mean like neck, sternum, abs?
thorax up.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, it pushes stuff downward. And what that stuff could include is the stomach contents. And so it can give people the appearance that they got a big stomach. When it's like, well, you don't have a big stomach, you have stomach contents that are just sitting down and forward. And so you can improve upon that by reverse engineering. You got to get the guts to go back and up. Well, how do I do that? Well, I need to have space up here so that way the guts have some ability to travel upward. And so that can involve minimizing rectus abdominis activity. Um, that can, that's a big piece of that, which can allow the chest wall to expand more often. And then over time, you want to work to being able to get yourself upside down. Because then you can fill the highest parts of the lungs. The guts are literally moving upward, which is why I got one of those things right there.
I'm all darked out. What am I looking at?
See it's an inversion. Oh crap!
Oh, yeah, I can't see anything, but yeah, I just got rid of mine. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh
Boom,
yeah.
inversion table. Yeah.
So you use it more for like breath stuff. Like people are doing it, they're thinking about their spine and stuff. You're thinking about how I'm able to like kind of reorient your system and get your breath actually moving upward through your body.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah,
That's
it's
cool.
also
I
I have
should have got
a
rid of mine. It's also what?
yeah. Well, I got mine because I'm going to be getting a medical procedure later this year, and I need to try to get as much motion up here as humanly possible. So.
I wish I would have kept mine now. I'm thinking about it. So when you're moving to inverted, like, is there a timeline or how does someone know before they're ready to go to like an inverted, certain measurements or anything?
Um, I mean, that would be ideal because then you got to look at like, well, what is it going to take to fill up the highest most segments, which is looking at like, shoulder flexion, maybe some of the measures like horizontal abduction, adduction, um, neck rotation. I also think like eyes, ground contact, breath. Like, can you, as you're doing a movement, see everything get bigger and everything get smaller as you breathe in and breathe out? But the nice thing about an inversion table is because it's non-weight bearing, you can generally get into that a lot sooner than say like a
Yeah.
handstand.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. And then what's going on with the pelvic diaphragm in that kind of presentation?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, you can have that with someone who's more narrow or wide. It's typically more narrow because and some of that has to do with the pelvic shape, so the guts don't go as low with the wide. But anyways, um, if I have all this downforce of the guts moving downward, basically you have the pelvic floor, and it could be still contracting, but it's attempting to elongate as much as possible because stuff is going down, and so it's preventing the pelvic floor is trying to prevent things from going up. Um, and so a part of being able to improve the pooch belly from a movement standpoint is to be able to get the pelvic floor to
Okay,
ascend because that's needed to push the guts upward.
that's what I was wondering. So would you like for a wide, would you recommend like a box like tap and go or just a narrow for to help with that?
It depends on a lot of this. I mean, I'm saying it depends so much. It depends on what like. muscle activity and all that looks like. Like if someone is really restricted in the hips and all that, you hold at the bottom for many, even if they are narrow. Eventually, you'd want to work towards the tap and go. There's
Yeah.
probably some utility in giving that tool wide because, like, maybe it's not like their main loading, but it's like, okay, they don't have a structure conducive to stress shortening, but it's like they still need to practice that
Yeah.
because all movement at some point will rely on that. And so you should probably get good at that. But in theory, a wide has an easier time accessing the ascended position of the pelvic floor, and they need to let go.
Yeah.
But just because they have an easy time accessing it doesn't mean they're black belt at using it.
Yeah, that's so true. That's like I said, that's what we were talking about earlier. Access does not mean you got any ability to utilize it at all.
Yeah.
Have you, is it, can you get like thrown off? Can you have a wide ISA or vice versa, like a narrow pubic, infrapubic angle? Or they always go together?
So from a like shape positioning, like in terms of whether the axes at which they move are
Yeah.
generally similar,
Yeah.
but what you can have is different proportions, and that's where it might look like one's wider up top and narrow down low. But that has to do with more the shapes of the bones than essentially like the axis by which they move.
But they'll
So
always match pretty much.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I was
yeah,
curious. I've never seen that. I was wondering if that was something that was possible though.
yeah. Well, it's like um, you know the thing you have to think about is like that vertical versus more horizontal orientation is not just the infrasternal angle, it's all of the tissues. It's like the face has that. So like one thing I'll tell people like because sometimes measuring the rib cage can get confusing because if someone's very arched, that's going to look different versus someone who's got significant sternal depression. But it's like if you look at the facial labia, the shape of that is generally either more vertical like me or it's further out like this.
Oh.
Um, Wides generally have more square face. Narrows are more long and oval. I mean, you could look at the difference in our face shapes. Like I think that's a prime example. Like I think most people agree we look differently.
What about like joint size? Do people can you use that at all to tell anything? That's kind of the old bodybuilding way. It's like how thick are your joints? Can you wrap your hand around your joints? Does that have anything to do with anything?
Yeah. The thing that gets tough though is like if you get someone who's like a really you know tall person and you compare them to like a very short or small like wide, well, they might have the same, but yeah, a lot of it is narrows will have a smaller radius of their limbs, whereas like wides will not. They'll just have they'll be as the great philosopher Eric Cartman once said, "I'm not fat, I'm big boned."
Yes.
So
Um,
I'm more big boned.
I love it. They just got a huge deal. Did you see that?
Yeah, my sister sent me that. It was like 1.5
Like
billion or
billions.
something.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so
Yeah.
glad that we
Like I'm
have
doing the
them.
wrong thing. Me too. I love South Park.
And they're just untouchable.
Yeah.
Something I was curious about. I don't do it enough. I got to start incorporating a little bit more. What's your favorite way to implement the like a chop? Like, what is there a particular type or a particular situation you tend to go to it most often?
Um, I've
I
been
know
using
there's
them a
tons of
lot.
I know there's tons of ways, but like, do you have a ones that tend to stick around more than others?
Not necessarily. It's like what you want to think about what a chop does is it basically unweights you because if I'm pushing the weight down, I'm going up.
Well, I guess I'm also including lifts too. Then I guess lifts.
So, okay, well then lifts though, it's like if I'm trying to unweight someone or I want to bias more external rotation, those two are paired, then I might chop. Lift, if I'm pushing a weight up, then I'm going more down. So that's more weights, it's more IR bias. But I've been using them a lot lately to teach weight shifting into different positions. I would say that's probably been the biggest utilization. Um, but the problem with chops and lifts is where do you transfer to beyond that? I That's where I like a lot of fake throws and med ball throws. Like I think that's got a lot more utility. If I can get people to that and then just change the stance depending on where I'm trying to drive motion, then that's useful. So, but that's just the general trend. So like if we wanted to get someone uh, back on the right side, it's like I might chop towards that side and position the limb so that way they can turn into the right? And then you can manipulate whether, side's elevated or not, depending on what you're going for.
And are you doing this more to like get control ranges of motion utilized, or are you looking for improvements on table tests after this?
I'll get table test changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually it's like I'll I'll give some base moves to get some motion changes, and then I'll program things within a warm up to help drive that even further. Recheck if I can.
Yeah.
Sometimes I work with a lot of people remotely. It's a lot of like just visual. Am I seeing what I'm seeing? And then is the whole program helping me push to where I need to go?
Um, and then we kind of mentioned this the last time, real briefly. I wasn't going to bring anything, but I saw Bill just posted about it. It was interesting. I didn't get a chance to look at it, where he was really kind of, I don't think he was critiquing it. I don't know what he was breaking down, but he was kind of going into like tensegrity model and its application
Mhm.
with like maybe an ECM lens. This is something I've been trying like to like, you know, get like a just kind of some basic concepts of, because to me it's like really interesting, right? Like I feel like internally, like the ECM model and the way gradients work and the way we express ourselves makes a lot of sense. But then how it like goes externally, that's something I'm kind of like still trying to get a concept on. Did you get a chance to see what he put out on that? What
Yeah.
was that about? And then like, can you give me some basis of that and maybe your thoughts on if biotensegrity and the tensegrity model is something that can go with ECM, or if it's kind of just like a part of it, or if you think it's not something really to like worth looking into even.
No, so well, the book is probably one of the hardest books I've read. So
The
there's that.
original?
The
Lewin or what?
No, it's Scar.
Scar, yeah, Graham Scar, yeah,
Yeah, that one. That one.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a beast. Like it was a challenging read. So I definitely think there's some utility in it, and I think there was a lot of things I had heard Bill talk about that I had seen in there and in the past. So I'm like, oh, okay, I see where that's coming. Um, it's funny he had the squish ball because like at my seminar I have like a bazillion of those. Uh, but yeah, I mean I can't comment on what he was talking about with the the suspension field. I haven't, yeah, I'm not as familiar with that. To me, I just think this is like for me, in the way I teach things, it's a useful way to explain movement because when I apply pressure somewhere, things have to expand in other places, and then the beads within move towards areas of expansion. Um, so yeah, I think there's some merit to learning that. If this is the big thing, is the theoretical understanding by which you have things the rate limiting step to you helping people and reaching their goals. I think I feel guilty and victim to this many times. A popular pop sci book comes out or something, and everyone's reading it, and you read it, and it does nothing for you in terms of changing what you're going to do. A good example of this, I think, was several years ago, is Anti-Fragile. Like, no one changed anything that they did after reading that. They just changed how they explained things a little bit. Um, but it's like you might think different, but you're doing the same.
Yeah,
Me, I would rather do different and do better. And so when anyone approaches anything, I think the best book you could ever buy is The Goal, and it's by I forget his name. But anyways, there's two versions. You can, if you don't want to read the full novel, because it's actually a story. You can get the comic book version, give you the gist of it. But I'd recommend reading the full thing. But basically, like a system will only grow insofar as you address its biggest constraint. And I think, and I know I did this a lot in my early career, and I try to do it less now. But I would try to consume everything I could. Um, but if you don't apply it immediately, it's in one ear out the other. And so, anytime you consume something, I would try to cater it to something you can apply as soon as humanly possible because it will stick better because there's an emotional attachment to something. Like, gosh, I have clients right now who I'm struggling with, and I'm talking with my coworkers, my buddy Mark, who's helping me out. Like, I'm learning so much from him, Mark Maringe. Um, like the things I see there, it's like, oh, boom, I can use that immediately, and I see how that's going to change what I do on the next day, and I either get an outcome or I don't, and then I make adjustments accordingly, and that's a far superior way to learn, I think, than reading stuff at random.
yeah.
So that's what I would ask with anything. It's like biotensegrity. Should you read it? Is your theoretical understanding of things the limiting step for you doing the things you need to do? And it might.
I
It
don't know
might.
if anyone's theoretical understanding of biotensegrity is their limiting factor. For,
Well,
I don't know.
I'm Graham Scar. Well, he'd be like, "Hey, man, you're killing my book sales." I was like, "Well, no."
I think no,
Well,
I just
obviously, I have the book and I've read
yeah,
it, right?
yeah.
So,
I've got like three of them. I'm still trying to fucking grasp it.
yeah. Well, but it's like, are you using it?
Yeah, I
Because
mean
if
that's the
you're
thing.
not using it, then what's the
Conceptually,
point?
like exactly, it was not applying like specific things so much, but I really like I had Pat Davidson on. I like the way he expressed it too, is he said it's kind of like, and I think he got it from Bill, which, of course, like it all kind of trickles from Bill, right? But he was talking about how like people kind of got really crazy with it. Like everything's so interconnected. It's like, yeah, there's overlap, but it's like if you drop a pebble into the water, or like, there's gonna be a lot of ripples there, but it's gonna move away. Or if you like poke a spider web, you're gonna have a big impact right where you're poking it. Yeah, it's gonna impacted over there, but like how much does that actually matter? So that's kind of how I've used it, is like, okay, I know it's impacting everything, but is this going to affect the end goal of getting the position I want to achieve and so on? But yeah, I just like to yeah, I like to like know. I think the human body is so complex, and that's one of the things that makes me push back against so many people that are just kind of simplify it and just
Mhm.
straight Newtonian physics on like a lever model, because it's like there's tons of physics involved, but it's way more complex than that. It'd be like a whole like couple boards of problems to try to actually figure out probably how to do torque if we actually knew everything that went into joint torque,
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, well, it's just like at a certain point, those systems will fail because they have in reality. Like Newton is not the final say on physics, and that's not to say that like quantum and relativity and whatever other theories out there are, but they're less wrong. And
Yeah,
so if you can find ways to become more and more less wrong, but also like your execution should change as well, then I think that has some utility.
well, I think Bill has the good quote, right? You probably know it. What's his quote about models? Um,
Well, it's George Box. All models are wrong. Some are useful.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
One more thing I was just curious about. I meant to ask you earlier. With some of the positional drills, I was wondering, because as I've been doing this, I have some drills that I like are my go-tos that weren't my go-tos, and I got rid of some of my go-tos. I was curious, like, are there any ones that you've moved away from that maybe you used earlier in your career?
God, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, most things I used to do a lot of posterior tilting with people, and I don't really do that anymore. I don't. It varies. There's certain drills that I like right now that I don't. It's funny. I was saying I start a lot of people on the two block decompression, but I've also been finding like, well, there's other exercises that work pretty well, or I don't use that as much, or sometimes just sideline works good too. It really depends, and it goes in waves. I wouldn't say like, actually, I want to talk about something in the other way. Um, I actually kind of came back and started using dead bugs and bird dogs again.
Yeah, the old
And those fell
McGill.
out of favor a long time
Yeah,
ago. Yeah,
yeah.
coach them differently, different goals. I use different constraints, but like, I, those worked well in the past. It's like, oh, I see why they could work now. Um,
Do you still
so
do the like the one on the ball where you're going to the side a little bit? It's kind of like a
like a
dead ball
roll.
thing. Yeah, just like real
Yeah.
softly. I like that a lot. I play with that a lot.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, yeah. For the person who tends to be more arched,
Yeah.
doesn't have the sternal depression, like the Swiss ball has been really useful. Yeah, yeah.
And then I was curious if are there any like drills that you don't do really at all based off of like archetype? Like, are you having a lot of wides? Like, I know a lot of people don't have wides do like a hook line necessary all that much.
Um, no, I don't want to eliminate anything from my toolkit and say like this is always bad because again, like I couldn't tell you the last time I performed a bird dog and then 5 years later I used it. Or like I was very anti like cobras or press ups or back bridges. As extension, bad. There's some of my best techniques now for getting rid of or minimizing rectus abdominis
Yeah.
activity. And it's like I think, yeah, I think it's always good to keep everything in the back pocket because you never know when you'll need it. you know. Um, I could think of actually a personal example right now. So Mark was working on me the other day, and me getting my right hip ER is awful, and I can think back to everyone I've worked with. No one can get it. Um, I had appendix. I had my appendix taken out in fourth grade, and I have this scar here that's like really adhered. And I'm just like, what if we worked on that?
Yeah.
And we did, and like my right hip and right shoulder like improved significantly. Like I think we got me to 50 degrees ER and 45 on the shoulder, which is a lot for me. IR. Um, so it's like, I probably earlier in my career would have poo-pooed any scar stuff because it gets a little woo-woo. But it's like I was wrong. It's like, well, I'm glad I won't poo-poo that now because it's like clearly I see there's some utility here.
Yeah, immediate.
So yeah, it's like yeah, just keep everything and just it's knowing when to do the thing.
It's interesting how like your lens changes. Like I started with like as a manual therapist, that was like first thing I did. So I was always let's fucking just put my hands on you. Let's make some changes. This is quick. This is easy, and kind of go away from it. And now like I'm doing a lot less. And then like every now and then I'm like, why the fuck didn't I just do this first? Like I could have just done this, and we could have been working for an extra 15 minutes. But I'm trying to like I'm not that I'm not trying to do it. I'm just my lens isn't like that's not in my forefront of my brain where. It used to be probably too quick to go to it. So I always think that's interesting. I think it's important to, not lose your tools as you get new ones either.
Mhm. Yeah, dude, I'll tell you what, like right recently, I've probably gone back more to manual therapy than I did in the past. I had a guy who I saw today who very high arches, like the ankles were limited in multiple directions. Like first part of us working together, I did a bunch of stuff to his feet. A lot of the things I gave him for home, self manual mobilization to his feet, and he felt a lot better. And like we got very good changes. Um, so just find tools or techniques that get the job done and hit the goal. And if you don't have them, then you got to go find stuff.
Nice. Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Thank you. I was able to run through most everything I had for you. I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you want to cover? Anything else you want to put out there at all before I let you go, man?
Um, yeah, no, man. I mean, this is fun as always. I think if people could just seek to understand in general versus just bashing and try stuff like that would be the world would be a happier place.
Yeah, my audience is all about it. That's cool. What would you say is the biggest benefit for like bodybuilders who are really knowledgeable about this kind of stuff? What's the main benefit for them understanding this?
I think you'll be healthier.
Like long term, like joint integrity
Yeah,
and
for
yeah.
sure, for
Yeah.
sure. I'm not saying it's a cure all because sometimes like stuff just breaks down in people. Um, but if you can mitigate that, I think that's useful. And I think too, like your sport is progressively going to cause you to lose the number of positions that you can access. And I'm sure at a certain point that will influence your ability to access positions you need to in the bodybuilding context. And I know that because the bodybuilders who I do work with say, I can't hit this pose or I can't hit that pose. I can rotate this pose this way, but I can't the other way. Like if any of that resonates with you, I haven't seen any bodybuilding exercise that helps improve rotation because there's so little rotation involved in the sport. So it might behoove you to explore some of this stuff if it resonates with you and works for you. So
Yeah, and
that's
also
what I say for folks.
yeah, people are so neurotic too. Like they see the little imbalances so much too, and like so much of that is because we're turned all fucking crooked. Like it's very common to see like a good left pec that can be nice and full, and then the right's like fucking same. See ya, I'm not really here. So like I think yeah, the pain and the longevity is the biggest part, but especially if you're competitive, you got to be able to access stuff. But you also the symmetry is like one of the biggest parts of bodybuilding. So this stuff will help with that a lot. And like I always give you tons of credit. I think Zach's the best at this. I love Pat. People should check out Pat and Danny. Is there anyone else you really like that puts out really good information that you would recommend people check out?
Well, Bill, obviously, I
Yeah, I
think
mention Bill all the time. Bill, everyone loves Bill, but then they just he's just it's Bill. You gotta like get it direct from the source, but it can be hard to absorb unless you're in that mindset and have been in that world a little bit.
yeah, yeah. He's definitely a challenge. He's the final boss.
Yeah, I love it. I mention him all the time. He just had his course. I sent a few people over there to take his cohorts course and stuff. So
Oh, nice, great, yeah,
yeah, because
yeah.
like you said, he's
Um,
he's not going to put himself out there. We got to get people knowledgeable about him.
Yeah, Sean and his group, the AMP mentorship. I'm actually in that right now, and it's been really good. Like he's sharp. Like he's probably one of the others out there who I'm like, yeah, he's worth learning from.
Yeah, that was a
Um,
good chat we had. His whole that whole
yeah,
crew, they're really smart and really like they dive into the nuances because
they
they're
do. Yeah,
yeah.
Greg and Uncourt are brilliant minds.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're all very good. Um, and one thing I will say, if you can find, like, probably the best way to learn is find someone who you look up to, who resonates with you, who you think gets it, and try to work with them.
Yeah, that's
Because
by
the
far the
best way
best.
to learn, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I mean, and I can say that, like, I teach this stuff on the regular, but I work with someone, and I've learned so much from that. And I've actually done that with a lot of things, like myofunctional tongue stuff. I worked with several people, and I was able to learn a lot of movements and progressions from that I use with patients and clients. Um, I've worked with a neuro-optometrist. Like, I went through vision therapy, and that's given me stuff to help people. Not like fix significant visual issues, but sometimes that's a strategy you can use to create movements.
Yeah,
And so I think the best way to learn is by doing.
definitely. Well, appreciate it, man. Hopefully, I will see you out in November. I'm gonna try to make it out there. You're not coming to
Yeah.
LA at all anytime soon, huh?
No, no.
SoCal?
I just got the San Francisco one. Human Matrix is going on. Obviously, of course, Human Matrix. If you want practical application, that's where to go, because like we do dive into theory, but a lot of it is doing and practicing and coaching. Because what I've seen with, I've been teaching this seminar for 8 years now. Um, Most people, like, biotensegrity is not the limiter. It's
Yeah.
people have a hard time getting themselves into good positions to be able to get changes and coach them.
I,
And
I was just gonna say I've worked with people who have taken tons of courses but can't apply it for shit. So it's like you can take
yeah,
all the courses in the world, but yeah, unless you're there hands on actually doing it and feeling it, it's way different.
it is. It is. Yeah. And I'm biased, obviously, but I think, based on the feedback that I get, uh, my seminar is one of the better ways to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Are you working on anything else at all? Last time I talked to you, you had some stuff in the works. I haven't heard anything though.
Coaching, like, we're just I'm trying to get as many people on our coaching front as possible between myself, Sebastian, and Trevor. That's been the biggest piece right
Do you think
now.
about
Because
doing
I
any
think,
like so I was gonna say, do you think about doing any online courses at all or anything?
maybe down the line, but not currently.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's like, I want to. I think a lot of it is, what's nice is, because I have so many coaches now, we can see at volume what works and what doesn't. And I think
Awesome.
that's a better way of informing, what an online course would be like, because it's
Yeah.
like, well, we've used all this. This seems to work really good.
It'd be really cool if you had like different ones like after you've attended the Matrix, if you want to dive in a little deeper and stuff, I have like an option for online stuff where you've already like at least done some of the hands-on things because yeah,
Yeah.
to go in real deep without doing any hands-on is kind of tough. But awesome,
Yeah.
cool. Well, looking forward to it, man. Hopefully I see you out there. Keep up all the good work, man. Appreciate all the stuff you put out. You're helping a lot of people.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me on, John.
Awesome. All right, thanks a lot, buddy.
Yeah. I'll see you.
All right, take it easy.